Hi everyone, Lix here. Welcome. So, a lot of people have claimed that authoritarian China was under a complete COVID lockdown. But funny enough, it was often the so called non authoritarian Western governments that actually imposed some of the harshest restrictions. Meanwhile, Jerry Gray was out there cycling thousands of kilometers across dozens of big cities and hundreds of smaller towns in China. Now, Jerry's story is pretty unique. He started out as a police officer, at one point, even protecting Lady Diana, then went on to become general manager of a leading security company in Australia. Later, he shifted gears and built a career in China as a teacher and business consultant, backed by an MBA in intercultural management. Altogether, he spent more than 2 decades living and experiencing China in ways very few foreigners ever have. In this video, Jerry is going to share his first-hand insights and set the record straight on those Western claims of total lockdowns in China. So let's jump right in. Quick heads up, the video quality is decent, but not perfect. We had some internet hiccups in Vietnam. Jerry, one of the big claims we hear in the West is that China's COVID lockdowns showed brutal authoritarianism. But during the pandemic, you were literally cycling across thousands of kilometers, visiting city after city. What was that experience really like, and how did you manage it?
COVID is a thing that many people have opinions about because their opinions are based on their own experience. If you were not in China, then I promise you, you're not entitled to hold an opinion on what happened in China. If you lived in Shanghai, your opinion would be different to my opinion because your experiences would be different. Your lived experiences would be different. Most of China was not locked down, full stop. Most of China was not locked down. I can assure you of that. So let me go back to my lived experience and start with what actually happened. First of all, when COVID was discovered in Wuhan, they did something that possibly was a little overkill, but was definitely a good idea. They locked down every city in China on restrictions. Now, what those restrictions meant was public places closed, shopping centers closed, but supermarkets were allowed to remain open. Libraries closed down, public parks closed down, which I would have thought would be the one thing you could keep open, but they know because a lot of people in China congregate in public parks. So they closed the public parks. You couldn't congregate. So anywhere where you could congregate, anywhere that was kind of potentially swimming pools, gymnasiums, massage parlors, mahjong rooms, all of these things, KTVs, they all closed down. And they closed down for a long period of time. Some of them never reopened. So they did. They were closed down for a long period of time. Now, I don't go to most of those places. So what happened in Zhongshan, where I live, was they made an announcement that they're going to start restrictions. And they said, you can only go out every second day. Now, it was very loose restrictions. I was going out and meeting my friends, having a drink, coming home again. And then one day I was on my way out and they said, do you have a pass? Well, I don't need a pass. I went out yesterday. You can only go out every second day from now on. And you can only go out for 3 hours to do your shopping. Okay, so where do I get the pass? We'll give it to you. So they gave me a pass and I've still got it. I kept it. It's a little sheet of paper with the calendar, and they tick a box and they tick me back in when I came back. And what they did then at the same time was they closed off all the areas where I could get in and out of my gardens, the area that I lived in a little community. It's an old village. It wasn't like a gated community. And it had about 12, I think it has 14 entrances. 12 of them got closed. So we were funneled through these 2 checkpoints. And local government officials were checking me in and checking me out. Now, for about 6 weeks, that's how it lasted. My wife was allowed out inside the community. She was allowed, if she took the piece of paper, she could go out shopping for 3 hours. But I did most of that. I would go up, meet my friends, have a drink, and then come back with the shopping. And they were all okay. There was no problems. It was very, very relaxed. And this is where you get the images of people say, oh, they're welding people into their apartments. They were not. Nobody got welded into their apartments. What they were doing was closing off smaller entry exit points so they could funnel people through a checkpoint. That was the first start. And during that period of time, I flew to Thailand. And I didn't fly for a holiday. I was looking for a job. I was unemployed. I was 60 years old, basically unemployable. And so I wanted to work for a little more. I didn't have a lot of income. I didn't have a lot of savings. And I didn't have a pension at that time, too young for my pension. So I needed to get work. And I had a friend working in Thailand who I'd worked with here in China. He said, come across this great opportunity. So I went across to Thailand and I arrived the same day that somebody died of COVID. First person to die of COVID in Thailand was a Bangkok taxi driver. And I arrived the same day that person died. So the day that happened, Thailand basically said, no, we're not going to touch Chinese people. So China was closed down to Thailand. And I spent a few days there, met up with my friends. We had some drinks, had some meals. We just did holiday style stuff. And then I flew back to China into quarantine, 2 weeks in quarantine. And that was secure lockdown. I was in my own apartment, not in a hotel, but I was not allowed to leave the apartment. They came and checked on me every day. Someone told me that they had cameras outside, but I don't think that was true. But they did come and check on me every single day. And my wife had to move out. We had another apartment that a friend of ours was living in. So she went to live with her friend, and I was living on my own for 2 weeks. When that was over, I was out, and all restrictions had been lifted, except for things like KTVs, massage parlors. Those kinds of restrictions were still on. But I could walk around town. I could go shopping. I could go to a bar. I could buy drinks. I could just do the normal things. I could cycle around. We were in a state of a slight elevated awareness, and that was all that was. My wife and I went for a 7 week cycle. We left our home and we cycled into Guangxi, which is the next. It's actually not a province; it's a region. It's an autonomous region. So we cycled into Guangxi, which is about 300 kilometers away from here, the border, maybe 400. So we cycled there. Then we cycled around Yangshuo, the famous places with the karst mountains. And we cycled up to Guilin and we spent a few days there, stayed with friends in a university campus. Then we cycled up to the Longji rice terraces, those gorgeous rice terraces that you've seen pictures of in China. And then we cycled home, and it took 7 weeks. Then I got a contract to go to 14 different cities to do some IELTS training, teaching teachers how to teach IELTS. So I went off and I did that. That was with an international company that paid me in foreign money, so I was allowed to do that. It's not something you could probably get away with now, but in those days, if you weren't paid in RMB, you could work. So I was doing some contractual work like that. And yeah, I traveled. I worked out. I calculated later on when people told me I was locked down. I calculated that I traveled to 41 cities. I don't know how many towns I traveled through. It would be in the hundreds, but 41 different cities during the period of COVID I went into. Now, I even did the Three Gorges tour. We went into Chongqing. I was working in Chongqing and I finished a contract, had a 10-day contract working in Chongqing. And I finished it, and we got the Three Gorges tour down to Yichang in Wuhan. So that was Chongqing is a municipality. Wuhan is the province, and it's the province where COVID restrictions were probably the highest. We were there. I had to get tests in all of these places. COVID tests when you go into a city, COVID tests before you leave a city, COVID tests when you arrive back home. So that was the only restriction. We were definitely not locked down. Then towards the end of COVID, when they were trying to contain something, I honestly think that China did overreact or kept it going for too long at this period. I have some criticism, but it's not criticism of the overall policy. It's criticism of the fact that they probably dragged it on when 9,000 people in Guangzhou alone were already infected. There's not much point in isolating 9,000 people, because by the time we've isolated them, another 90,000 people have been infected. So it was not necessary then. But by then, it had turned into Omicron, and it was a slightly less deadly form. And it was December the 4th, Zhong Nanshan released a report that said we need to open up because everyone's going to get it anyway. So I went, and from December the 4th to Christmas, 3 weeks, exactly 3 weeks, I went from not knowing a single person who had had COVID to not knowing a single person who hadn't in that 3 week time. So I think maybe that was the shock that Zhong Nansan wanted. Let's get everybody infected. We'd all been injected. We'd all been, 90% of the people had been vaccinated. I think it was 93% of China was vaccinated, but we had no vaccination mandates. So that was really what happened. My experience of COVID was one of extensive traveling with lots of tests, very minor restrictions. I don't go to I don't play mahjong. I don't go to KTV. I don't use massage parlors. So I rarely go into our public parks, and if I do, I have a reason. But so most of the restrictions didn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. Some bars were closed, and other bars you had to, when you went in, you had to sign and give your telephone number. So if something had happened in that bar, everyone got a call, and you were told to restrict yourself, self-restrictions. But that never occurred. It never happened to me. I think I went into, in that entire time, I went into one bar 2 or 3 times, where in Zhongshan there's one foreign bar where a lot of the foreigners mix. I don't go in there very often at all anyway. So COVID didn't restrict me in very many ways. What it did do was it meant there was bureaucracy involved in COVID. I had to show my phone a lot. When I was in Beijing, I had a meeting in Beijing with CGTN and China Daily. I had interviews during COVID with those China Daily, People's Daily, Global Times, CGTN. When I was in Beijing, they flew me up. China Daily were doing a thing which had hundreds of people in it, and I was one of the guest speakers at that. Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you. We were traveling. There were some complications related to traveling, but there were very few restrictions. And then, of course, they locked down Shanghai, and everybody said, "Oh my God, this is huge." Well, yeah, 24 million people being locked down is huge. But Jiangsu, which is around the outside of Shanghai, has 100 million people and didn't get locked down. So let's put it into perspective. 24 million people in a country of 1.4 billion is not a huge amount. We were not locked down en masse. Nobody was. We underwent some restrictions while they sorted out what they needed to do to work out. I had 2 weeks of quarantine because I traveled outside of the country and came back. And then after that, we had some bureaucracy and a lot of testing, but we could still travel.
Thank you, Jerry. That's a wrap for today. More of my conversation with Jerry is on the way, so hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. Thanks for watching and for liking and supporting the channel.
踩着薄暮走向余晖暖暖的澎湖湾，一个脚印是小雨一串向我虚度时光，直到夜色吞没我俩在回家的路上。